Best of r/malicious compliance episode 60. Subscribe for edit videos daily. I work a night shift behind a reception desk at a hotel with a restaurant 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. Every morning, at around 6:17 a.m., Jenny would come in and start preparing the continental breakfast for the guests. My duty would be to give her a list of all the guests she should be expecting. One evening, before storming out of the lobby rather upset, she quickly took a step back to tell me how disappointed she was that no one called her the previous night to tell her that the hotel was empty and she had no reason to come to work in the morning. I tried explaining to her that I've only been here for 2 shifts and I had no idea that it's a regular procedure here, but also that the night shift starts at 11 p.m. which is quite late to be making calls to the staff. I also told her that the amount of people who are staying at the hotel are obviously known throughout the entire day before 11 p.m. which also includes late check-ins to happen after midnight. We both agreed that it's reasonable for the previous shift to announce the list to the restaurant staff, but upon asking my colleagues about it, they all said that it is indeed what all of them do. Since then, every time I come for my shift and the hotel is empty, I always make sure to ask my colleague if they have called the breakfast staff, just to be sure. Fast forward to a few nights ago, I clock in and see that the hotel was empty the previous night, but there's more than 10 people who checked in at 9 a.m. today. I get a call on the stationary phone at 1 a.m. from, you guessed it, Jenny herself, asking if there's people for breakfast. I said why of course. You would have been informed if there weren't, as we discussed. At that point on, all I heard was her husband arguing with her about how incompetent I was for not telling her no that she should come to work as she normally would. The morning came and she walks into the lobby, furious, and as much as I dislike confrontation, I told her there's absolutely no reason for anyone to give her a call, that she should follow a regular schedule. Plus, I knew she was working in the restaurant the previous day, which should have given her more than enough opportunities to check for herself. She stormed off once again, mumbling something like I'll make sure to let the restaurant manager know. Clocking in 3 days later, I noticed the hotel was once again empty the previous night but full for the same day, so I picked up the phone and rang her up at 2 a.m., not only waking her up, but also her husband, to let her know that she should come to work in 4 hours. All she said was I have my schedule, you know, also, it's 2 a.m. To which I said, I'm simply doing what you asked me to. Good night. Edit. Grammar. Thank you. Next. My mother often told me that I can have this thing if I paid for it with my own money. I got my first job over Christmas vacation and with my first check bought bleach and hair dye. I ended up dyeing my hair bright pink at my friend's house, and when I went home my mom was pissed. Mom, who said you could dye your hair? Me. You told me I could do anything I wanted as long as it was with my own money. She was seething angry, but said nothing. I had pink hair for all of the Christmas break, until it faded and I dyed it brown again. This happened years ago, but I still remember her face. It was priceless. Thank you. Next. As the title shows, it's a story about my dad that happened 2-3 years ago. To clarify, both my parents are doctors in hospitals in small rural part of my country. Yes, hospitals. One is a normal one, the other is a psychiatric one. Because of that they are the only specialists in their respective domains in the radius of about 80 kilometers. So if they want some free time they need to specify it long before, like even 2-3 months for a day off. Basically we were planning our next vacations a year before so the hospitals can get subs in time. Now we did as always. In September they had specified when they want their 2 free weeks. Hotels were chosen and paid etc etc. Almost a year later, not even a week before, my dad came like a zombie home. The hospital HR told him they didn't find a sub, so because of the special case, which is not special according to a friend who's a lawyer, he had to stay at work for 1 more week and join us later. We were completely bummed because of that, but we weren't going to be outdone by that. My dad brought the entire code of the hospital home and we looked everywhere to find something that would let us take our dad with us. Nothing until my mother started laughing at the table and she showed us something. She found out about a certain clause under which when the special case line was used the worker was treated and most importantly paid as a sub. That basically means that you can dictate your pay as long as it's in the fork for such specialist. That means 700,1500 euros for a day of work. Double it if you are on call, then double that if it happens to be a Sunday. That's why subs were never allowed to be on call. Cue the malicious compliance. My dad took every possible on-call duty for the entire week which he was forced to work. The numbers stacked fast since one of these days was a Sunday on call. My dad said that he was never more delighted when he knocked on the director's door to tell him how much he was owed. They completely forgot about that rule and the director could only stamp and sign approved all the while making the gaping fish face. It came to almost 30k euros for a week's worth of work. TL. Doctor. HR forget about a rule and make my father work on his free time. Got paid 3 months of work for just a week. Thank you. Next. Sorry, bit of a long one. My friend and I were walking our dogs through a huge, off-leash park in our town that's kind of wilderness way with crisscrossing streams and several bridges. We walked to the bridge that leads out of the park, then turned around and headed back in. Our dogs were running around playing with each other, and there was a man and woman coming towards us with 2 adult dogs and a puppy. The puppy was on leash but the woman let him off as they approached us. This puppy loved our 2 dogs and wanted to play, so we stood still for a bit, as did the other 2 people, and then my friend and I started to walk away. The puppy stayed with our dogs, so we kept glancing over our shoulders to make sure we didn't get too far from his person. Clearly we were the only ones concerned about that though because the other 2 people just walked away, in the opposite direction, without a glance back or a call or anything. My friend and I stopped walking, again to make sure not to increase the distance, but they never looked back. It's really wooded there, so it was tough to see them, but eventually we could see they were standing on the bridge out of the park, so we turned back and walked towards them to bring their dog back. We could see they were standing about 1/4 of the way along the bridge talking to some other people, so my friend called out, "Hey, can you call your dog?" several times, but they ignored her. We ended up walking all the way to the bridge to get their dog back to them, where my friend told them to put it back on leash so it wouldn't follow us, but they still ignored her and kept talking. We gave up and turned around and walked away again, and no surprise the puppy followed us again. And we got too far away for comfort again, so turned back a second time, and called to these people again to get their dog. This time the guy yelled at us, "Quit worrying about it and walk your dogs, we'll figure it out." I mean, it should have been clear to them at this point that their puppy was nowhere near them and following us, and that we doubled back twice to try and return it, but he told us off for trying to help, so we just said, "Okay buddy, you bet," and went back to our walk. I mean, if I'm being totally honest, we might have say, doubled our original walking pace, but still doing what we were told. Once we'd got out of sight I guess these stellar pet owners started to worry a bit, because the guy actually started to call the puppy, but that didn't work, and we were still walking. Eventually we were far enough away and out of sight that the guy started walk/running in our direction, still calling the puppy, which was still playing with our dogs and totally ignoring him, and we were still power walking away, just not worrying about it, just like he told us. A couple of extra details. This guy was in no kind of shape, and the ground is covered in fresh snow so super slippery and hard to run in. So now he's trying to run to catch up, still calling the puppy, and we can hear some pretty labored breathing. Unfortunately for him, my friend and I have now reached the steep uphill portion of the dog park and we're not slowing down. Puppy is still having a blast with our dogs. Now the guy is shouting various reasons that this is not his fault, like that it's not his dog, he's just trying to catch it for his friend, or that he didn't hear us before, to which we call back and keep walking away, because we're unclear on how any do that would be relevant, given that he shouted at us to quit worrying and walk our dogs. Now he's almost caught up but he's wheezing and panting and red in the face and trying to catch a super hyper puppy that's running full tilt around us and having no difficulty dodging him, and we're still walking. But eventually we decided we weren't enjoying having a wheezing, shouting, panting shadow, also some concern that he was about to have a heart attack, so I scooped up the puppy and handed it to him. To be fair to him he was quite grateful at that point, which is fair since we were only doing exactly what he told us to. Thank you. Next. I have a sweet snowblower and I love to help out my neighbors by doing the whole block. I'm that guy. After a moderate snow a few years My neighbor told me that he's very sensitive to noise and not to snowblow in front of his house. So, later that same winter we got 17. I got every house on the block front and back except for his. Even better, he was out of town. The weather warmed slightly for an afternoon then dropped again, so his 17 of snow became a wall-to-wall glacier. I live in Wisconsin. This is how we entertain ourselves in the winter. Thank you. Next. Demands from my older sister aren't anything new here. See, she's in her 30s. I'm in my 20s, so she thinks being older gives her some sort of superiority. Today I decided to show her just what happens if I actually do follow her demands exactly. She makes demands that I wash my laundry by tossing my laundry basket onto my bed while I'm still there. Okay, I put my laundry on just moments before she got home with her friend who wanted to do her own at our house. You wanted my laundry done. It's gonna take the whole day now. Next she quite literally shouts at me to have the kitchen spotless. Aye, Captain. Spotless it will be. I just finished mopping the floor so well that I'd be willing to eat off it. It's tile, so it'll be wet for hours. They won't be able to get any of the food or drinks they want while they take over the living room for the movie night. Oh, what was that? Dog hair everywhere? Don't mind that. The second they put their movie on I got straight to vacuuming every single inch of the living room floor. Not my fault I got in the way. I mean, she did say I had to clean. Update. It really didn't take long. She's told me to F off back upstairs and stay out of her face. Yes, I took a very long time to do it. Even polished the TV when I walked past. She's not happy, but I am. Thank you. Next. This happened a very long time ago. I grew up in a small community in a rural area. There was no transit and the majority of my friends were bused into our high school. Anytime I wanted to visit with friends I would need to be either driven by my parents or, when we turned 16, get a driver's license. At 16 I got my beginner's license and close to 17 was able to get my full license, which gave me the freedom that I craved and needed. My parents wanted to seem progressive, so they never told me I had a curfew but always insisted the car be in the driveway by midnight, and in essence I was always home by midnight. One weekend a friend of mine was having a party at his place and I borrowed the car and went. I met this girl there and we began talking and eventually found a quiet area and began making out. Unfortunately the time came where I had to go in order to have the car back in time. I told her my parents' rule and she suggested she follow me in her car and I can park my parents' car in the driveway and she would give me a ride back to the party. Great plan. I had the car in the driveway at 11:55 p.m. and back at the party by 12:30, picking up where we left off. She dropped me off at home at 5 a.m. and I made my way to the bedroom. I got up near noon and my father was fuming. Dad, being a light sleeper, heard me coming late. The conversation went like this. Mother, what time did you get home? Me, 5. Dad, and what time are you supposed to have the car home? Me, midnight. Dad, so then, why did you come home at 5 a.m.? Me, you have always said the car had to be home at midnight. You never said I had to be home at midnight. A girl I met followed me home when I dropped off the car and she gave me a ride back to the party. She then gave me a ride home after. The car was home before midnight. The smirk on my face went over too well with my dad, but my mom thought it was funny. Shaking her head she just said, well, he's got us there.